Hello and welcome to Say Hi to the Future, a podcast aimed at highlighting the human side of ingenuity. My name is Ken Tenser, CEO of SpyderWorks, a leading business consultancy for mid-market organizations and entrepreneurs globally. With me today is Dr. Caroline Brookfield, a reluctant creative, veterinarian, author, speaker, stand-up comic, and mom. Like this video if you enjoy our show and subscribe to our channel. Leave us a comment with who we should interview next. Thank you for tuning in, and I hope you enjoy the show. Okay, Dr. Caroline Brookfield, welcome to Say Hi to the Future.
Thank you. I'm thrilled to say hi to the future.
So Caroline, I've never read this about anybody before. You're a veterinarian, author, speaker, stand-up comic, and mom. Is that all true?
Yes, it's all true.
How does
I
that
don't have my
happen?
own Netflix special or anything, but
Okay, you should. So, how do all those things happen? Like, give us a little bit of who you are and what made you into all those amazing things.
sure. I mean, I think many people, I don't know, Ken, if you can relate, but growing up, I mean, there was lots of aspects of my personality. And in high school, I really developed a love for performance and acting, but I had always wanted to be a vet. And that was kind of my fast track. And I didn't really know how to do acting as a job. I didn't think I was really good enough. So I went into veterinary medicine, which has been a great career for me. But I kind of felt like I was missing something, like I kept searching for something. And it wasn't until I started taking acting classes again and stand-up comedy and really like taking some time to think about what are the things that I love in each of the jobs I've done. And it always came back to using my creativity and problem solving.
Very cool. And I love that because I think we all do have a stream running or a thread running through our careers. And we might not always understand that or see that. So it's wonderful that you took that step back and saw it. Now, what is interesting though, and I see the book there, The Reluctant Creative. Yeah, boy, people wish they were creative. I mean, and I hear that so often. First of all, what's creativity? And secondly, why would you be reluctant to embrace
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's the $1,000,000 question. So what is creativity? I think the challenge is that we don't really have words in English to describe the different types of creativity. So researchers call them big C and small c creativity. There's a few others depending on who you talk to. But big C, I think, is what most people think of, like epic artwork or performance or the iPhone. Whereas small c creativity, or is the stuff that I talk about, which is things people are already doing. They just don't call it creative. So whether you say you're a numbers person and you're building a pivot table, that's creative. Whether you're choosing your outfit for the day or throwing a dash of a spice into a meal, those are all things that are considered creative. So I think, the problem lies often with people's definition of creativity, not that they're not creative or they don't have a creative bone in their body. It's that they actually define it a little bit differently. And then to your question about, sorry, I also have ADHD, so I already forgot your second question.
Okay, I'll pick that up. But it's really interesting too, when you talk about creativity, people think they need to be creative to come up with really great ideas. And my books, my writing, my research is around human ingenuity and innovation, decades and decades as an entrepreneur. I won't name how many. What I say to people is you actually don't need to be creative. You need your eyes and your ears. You need to learn to become more perceptive or more receptive to what's going on around you. And the world will tell you, your customers will tell you, populations will tell you. I'm not sure if your dog patients tell you, but in general, you will be told if you are listening for what people need and for which direction you should go in. So creativity for me is an interesting thing that way.
Well, I think what you're talking about is creative, Ken, because what you're doing is you're collecting information and data and observing. One of the key foundations for being creative is to be curious, to your point. So being curious about what's going on and not getting stuck in these like rubrics and patterns of behavior that we do, because we wouldn't have survived if we didn't make shortcuts and quick assumptions about the world, like is it friend or foe, is it friend shaped or not friend shaped? So that has helped us. But to your point, what you're talking about is seeing things differently and being open to new ways of working by, absorbing what data people are sending to you, and then taking that information and adapting and putting something out to the world. That's literally creativity. So I think to your point, like there is an aspect of creativity to it, but I think what people confuse is that it has to be something epic. It has to be something unique. It has to be something no one's ever done before. And one of my favorite quotes about creativity, which is unattributed, is creativity is plagiarism undiscovered.
You know what? I couldn't agree with that more. And the other thing with innovation too, and creativity, innovation, that sort of field of study or work, innovation is not about invention. Innovation is just recognizing what is and what could be done better or differently. And I get sort of angry when I hear the old Henry Ford quote, if I had asked my customers what they wanted, they would have told me a faster horse.
Right.
I don't believe that. I think that what they would have said is, we would love to get from A to B warmer, drier, faster. It's not up to our clients to define what a car is, because they're not engineers, they're not designers, but people can tell you what they want. And that too, again, is why I don't, yeah, I agree with you that creativity is the application or interpretation, but you don't have to be that brilliant breakthrough inventor. You just have to say, oh, can I make it drier, faster, warmer? And maybe you can, maybe you can't, but that's where ideas come from, I think.
Yeah, that's very true. And I think what also is key to what you were just saying there is asking the right questions, right? So yes, if you ask people what they wanted, maybe they wanted faster horses. If you didn't clarify the problem, which is part of the creative problem solving process, the most important thing is clarifying the problem. The problem is not their horse isn't fast enough. Like you said, the problem is they need to get from A to B warmer and drier and faster. Yeah. And that doesn't mean a horse. And that's what I was mentioning about, like, we see things in these like categories, and when we can expand out of those categories, that's where I think true innovation and creativity happens.
Yeah, I really like your other point about clarifying, understanding what the actual problem is. I've started teaching a few years ago. Just really, it's always been an untapped passion, if you will. But I tell the business students, most people are solving for symptoms. Most people say they have a sales problem. No, they don't. They have a product problem, a distribution problem, a quality, a supply chain. They don't have a sales problem. And I know they get so aggravated with me after a while as with clients, but I always hammer that until everybody in the room goes, yeah, that really is the problem.
Yeah, I mean, it takes time. People don't want to take the time because they think that, if you don't know what you don't know, right? So if you think you know what the problem is and you dive down that road of trying to solve that, it's of course, it's not going to work. You need to take the time to clarify what the problem is and drill down. But you have to be open and curious to what people are saying. Back to your original point, you have to be open to the things that are coming back at you and be conscious of these reactions that we have that are instinctive, like confirmation bias, or, feeling like we know what the answer is. We don't like to sit in ambiguity. We want to be certain. There's all these different evolutionary adaptations that are conspiring against us to think creatively, because at one point that was not helpful.
Yeah. So, I mean, in this world we live in today, you talk about ambiguity. I mean, the world is ambiguous. Our days are ambiguous. So why would people be reluctant to be creative? Why would you be reluctant, at the beginning, at least, to be creative?
Well, it boils down to judgment, fear of judgment. I've all of my audiences, I ask this question, and sometimes I'll do a word cloud, and the same themes come up: time, not accepting by others, they don't think they're capable. But a lot of it is really revolving around some type of fear of judgment, that either their questions or their ideas aren't going to be heard, or they're going to be judged for it, or people are going to think they're othering, like they're weird. Because again, back to our instincts, at one point, if we were excluded from our group, we would have died. So we don't actually even recognize this pain. We feel it as physical pain. We feel judgment like physical pain.
Mm-hmm.
So we avoid it. But if you can think about, really, why am I worried about being judged? Like if you start to put on this thing that we've developed over, millennia, whatever, thousands of years, you really start to think about, why am I having this reaction? Why do I think it's, the sales problem? And you start to actually put some cognitive processes in place, which is kind of ironic. When you think about creativity, you think about it more of like loose and fanciful, but we really do need to really think about why we're reacting the way we are. So to your question, it's really fear of judgment that is an evolutionary adaptation to make sure that we didn't get excluded from our group and die from starvation or predation by a saber-toothed tiger or something.
So that it's interesting when you say judgment. I mean, it and in a social media fueled world, we are being judged relentlessly. So I'm wondering if it almost helps us in the sense of, do we become used to that judgment and just say, no, that is noise, and I need to focus in on what I am clear about or what I need to be clear about?
Yeah, I do think that to get better at failing and to putting yourself out there and feeling judged is practice. When you see people who are speaking out at meetings and are sharing something that you think, like, I would never share that, a lot of times it's not like they just were born that way. It's because they did it over and over and over again. And that's the wonderful thing about creativity. Even if you're talking about more of a traditionally creative practice like painting or singing, the more you do something and realize it doesn't actually matter, the better you get at it. People weren't born being, maybe there's some personality traits, but it's all just doing something over and over, like any skill. And I guess to your point about the social media, I guess the question is, how do you look at that judgment, right? Are you able to look at it objectively and think, who is this person, or who's judging me, or are they judging me? Because we infer things. Research has shown, there's research where they send people out in the world, and when we feel really worried about what we look like or something that we're doing or we're saying, they found that nobody really notices. So I think part of it is we think people care more about us than they really do.
I think that's a very fair point, and much of that judgment, I think, is, and I'm not a psychologist, but I think it's deflection, and an own contribution, albeit in a very negative way, feeling a contribution sense. So, how do you loosen up a room then? I mean, when you're working with businesses or teams that absolutely need to work together, that need to learn. Not to judge, but to contribute positively, which doesn't mean you're going to agree, which doesn't mean that the beginning and ending are going to be even remotely similar. How do you start working people down that path?
Well, the biggest thing, and it sounds so easy to say, well, just be creative, but you need to have safety or psychological safety in a group to be creative. Because if you're worried about being fired or being excluded because you have an idea, then it's not going to be conducive to creativity. So the first thing is to setting the stage and setting the framework to make sure that people feel like they have the chance to express their ideas, even the really bad ones, because those are the ones that sometimes lead to the good ideas. They're not, the idea itself is not the idea, but it helps to catalyze that thinking. So I think setting the stage and the framework and the expectations around what it looks like to be creative as a team. And then there's some tactical things to do as far as creative brainstorming. I mean, the typical thing is the boss or the most creative person in the group stands at the whiteboard and everybody shouts out their ideas. Well, now you've got that fear of judgment. And if we've got a few barriers. First is the barrier for ourselves. Like, I don't want to say this idea because I don't want people to judge it. And then the person at the whiteboard is going to body language or make some comment, even if they don't intend to filter that idea, which all cuts down on creativity. So things like having a variety of exercises, because we don't all create in the same way. There's this Hollywood version of brainstorming sessions. But some people prefer to brainstorm privately. Some people are introverts and they feel better writing their ideas. Some people feel better expressing their ideas. So having a variety of different strategies and tools, but also with that framework of like, this is where we're going and this is how we're going to approach it, is really important, but it takes time, right? So you can't just go in and say, I think that's what people want to do, Ken. They want to come in and be like, let's brainstorm for 20 minutes and we'll have this life-changing solution that's going to fix everything. And it's pretty unlikely, right? As you know.
I think it's more than pretty unlikely. And I think that, look, I think one of the major issues is that we are part of that drive-through society. We really do believe that we can, order and turn the corner, pay $5 and be brilliant. And the world doesn't work that way. The challenge is, though, and what we do around human ingenuity and say hi to the future is help people become comfortable in feeling uncomfortable. The ambiguity that we talked about before, not knowing. I mean, we were taught by our math teachers to start at the top and go to the bottom and figure out in a very linear fashion what the solution is. We were taught by our chem teachers to start at the bottom in a test tube, beaker, pot. Again, different process, but very linear. We weren't taught what to do when there was a break in the information flow and there is ambiguity and you have to extrapolate. And, more than creativity, and this isn't a judgment, this is just fact. We don't know how to think for this millennia. We don't have the sensibility to make decisions with that are ambiguous, that are incomplete. And I find so much of what we have to do is just tell people to take a deep breath. You've got to make a decision. It'll be on the fly. Go for it.
Yeah, I mean, that's such a huge topic in of itself. One of the researchers that I really follow and like their work is Karen Fuster and the University of Queensland team. And they've done work on tolerance of ambiguity. There's a lot of work on tolerance of ambiguity in physicians and in healthcare, and how we do have a personality predisposition to being able to tolerate ambiguity, which is what you're saying. The ability to sit and say, it's okay that I don't know the answer, but I have enough information that this is how I'm going to move forward. Yeah. So that is personality based, but there are other things that you can do to increase your tolerance of ambiguity, which also helps with leadership, helps with innovation, helps with job satisfaction, performance, a bunch of other things, well-being. But what I love about their study, and which is what got me interested in it, is it wasn't a causal relationship, but if you have higher tolerance of ambiguity, you're also highly correlated with creativity and well-being and resilience. So we've got these three amazing: creativity, tolerance of ambiguity, and resilience. Like, I think everybody could use more of all of those things. And the question is, if you increase your creativity, I think it's not proven, but you'll increase your tolerance of ambiguity, because everything you do that's creative is stepping into that space of how's it going to work out when I step on stage to do stand-up. Maybe no one will laugh. Maybe we'll throw tomatoes at me. Or when you're painting something, I don't know what it's going to look like. I'm just trying to represent this vista, but it might look different when I'm done. And so it goes back to that habit of the skill of practicing. The more you practice stepping off of that place of certainty into ambiguity, the better you get. And the more you realize the stakes usually are not that high. I mean, the reason we avoid ambiguity is because we don't know, if we didn't know if the saber-toothed tiger was going to eat us or be our friend, that was fatal. But also what you're saying, we aren't equipped because our instincts and our adaptations have developed over thousands of years. But like, that was when we were foraging for berries, like, let alone, from 10 years ago or a month ago to tomorrow. We just can't keep pace. And we do need to put that intentional thought behind what are we doing, and also getting more confident and stepping out and making a decision, the best decision we can, and realizing that's how you're going to innovate.
Yeah. And I mean, when you talk about stepping out, so I think that we've talked a lot about business and whatnot. And for me, There are two things. One that I'm very familiar with, or I was 10 years ago, in terms of stepping out and being judged, and that's being a father of teenagers. Quite literally, I learned so much from that part of my life, because teenagers are going through a tremendous growth spurt. And I don't just mean physically, I mean mentally and socially. That yes, there is a lot of pushback, there's a lot of integration of new learnings, and it doesn't always come back or come out in maybe the best possible way. The other one, though, that I'm fascinated in is you being a stand-up comic. So when you get on, like, what pushed you on stage and what have you taken away? Because there, I mean, it's immediate laughs or boos. I mean, I don't believe there's not too much in between in the comedy shows I've been at.
Yeah. There's a lot of like just silence sometimes,
Yeah.
which is usually when you're performing to other comics. They laugh on the inside. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. So, sorry?
What do you take away from that?
What do I take away from stand-up comedy? I think taking away from stand-up comedy is a habit and a practice and a skill to face fear, because I'm nervous most of the time before I go on. And, even public speaking is the same way. And I think if you weren't a little bit nervous, it means you don't care at all. What I've taken away from it is one of the big takeaways, which is something I wasn't expecting from comedy, is that you have to tell the same joke like 500 times to get better at it. Like the iteration at the very small, like you're telling a 1 minute joke in a 5-minute set or 10-minute set. And you've got to do that over and over and over again. Like there is a lot of creativity in writing, but it's the pedantic, small, repetitive tasks that is the same in business that you have to continue doing over and over again. And it doesn't mean rewriting a joke necessarily. It means a small tweak, like putting a pause somewhere or raising the pitch on your voice at a certain point of the joke. But just, you think it's immediate feedback, but if your joke goes well one night and bombs the next, how many times do you have to do that before you get an average of those experiences to decide if the joke is good, right? And it speaks to that ambiguity. Like this joke's killed the last 10 times, but it bombed tonight. You can never count on anything. So I think that's what it helps. It also helps me realize that nobody really cares that much about what I do. Like if I tell a joke and people think it's bad, they're not going to remember me the next day. Even if I were to go virally because I did something so bad on stage, that'll go away eventually. And also that people, sometimes there's, people do want to see you succeed, but a lot of people want to see you fail. And I think it's because that whole crab in a bucket idea where the crabs pull the other crabs climbing out of the bucket, they pull that crab down because it reflects upon them. Like, well, and I see that in veterinary medicine. Sometimes I talk to my colleagues and I can tell they don't really understand what I'm doing, and they kind of don't like it because they've defined themselves by being a veterinarian. And because I am not defined by that, it somehow threatens their identity. I don't know. I'm not a psychologist either, but it just seems like it can be threatening or inspiring. So sometimes, I am an entrepreneur as well. I had a jewelry business and I didn't tell anybody at the vet clinics about it because I thought they would think that's really weird. Like you're like, why do you do all these things? But then I stopped caring because I was like, the stand-up comedy, I'm just going to share my creativity. And I know it's going to hurt sometimes, but it's something I feel like I need to do. And then like a month or 4 months later, people would come back to me and say, you told me about your jewelry business. And then I remembered that creative thing I used to do. And why don't I do it anymore? I just kind of got out of the habit and I started doing it again. And I'm feeling really happy. And I just realized, like, by expressing myself through stand-up comedy or whatever it is, I'm also giving permission to other people to do that. And I see how happy it makes them and how engaged in the world. And I think that's how we're going to survive, by iterating and helping people see that their creativity matters and that we need to be creative. Even if you think it's a tiny little thing, even if it just makes you feel happier, because we know research proves that engaging in a creative task today makes you feel happier tomorrow. If that's all it is, then why not, right?
No, I absolutely. And again, I mean, that was a wonderful thread. And again, one of the things you talked about was getting up on stage and doing it, and B, practice. Again, and we talked about it before, it's a drive-through world, but whatever we want to get better at, we need to practice. And it's, I think, and you talked about the crabs as well and getting ahead and what do we stand for? What will we look like? But I think we were raised on practice makes perfect. And I don't think practice does make perfect. And I think if we could say practice makes competent, and what you do with that competency is going to make you good, bad, or indifferent. I think that would lend us to understanding that, as you said, what's great one day may not be great tomorrow. So keep it up and keep working at it.
Yeah. I mean, nothing's guaranteed, right?
Yeah. So, dance, the dance acronym. What is that?
So, with my ADHD, as you probably noticed, I go on little tangents and I like to keep things simple. And actually, I won an innovation award at a job where I was working at a pet food company, and I had to train vets and vet staff on nutritional management of medical diseases. And it was kind of boring. So I made it into a game. And so I try to make things really simple. So dance is an acronym for what I found in my personal practice of creativity, but also in what I've read in many years of researching the peer-reviewed, data and evidence on creativity, into 5 easy habits that if you do these things, because everybody is creative. So like, I can't teach you how to be creative if you're already creative. It's like you're breathing already, Ken. I can't teach you how to breathe, right? But I could teach you like a pranayama practice or like a box breathing or something to help manage your breathing for a result. And so that's how the DANCE acronym works. It's just 5 easy habits. If you embed these ideas into your day, you'll be more creative, I promise.
Very cool. So Dr. Caroline Brookfield, it's amazing how quickly things go, but we're coming to the end of Say Hi to the Future, our discussion today. I'd like to end on one thing. I mean, because we've covered a lot of topics, a lot of ground. Again, though, weaving through the whole notion of creativity, and I think becoming more aware of who and what we are, and more aware of our surroundings, and how to accept feedback, positive or negative. I think that's been a very big part. The other thing, though, and this is an amazing thing about your background. I mean, it's such a dichotomy of learned experiences and obviously as a vet, education. But you said something, and you had mentioned your jewelry business. And one of the quotes I read was, I didn't want to go back to school for an MBA, so I built a business instead. Where do you think that learned versus experience of education really fits into our daily lives or our work lives?
Yeah, I think I'm a big believer in education and data and evidence, and I think there's a really important place for that. I think that quote also came out of when I looked, but I think we also need to critically assess what we're trying to achieve. So when I first started speaking about creativity, and this is common to many speakers, I was like, I should probably have some kind of qualification. Like, should I get a master's of creativity? There is such a thing. Like those are the things that we run through. And I think we need to sit back and objectively look. If I'm trying to learn surgery, I need to learn surgery. I can't just pick up a scalpel and practice like stand-up comedy, right? You need to have experience. Mm-hmm. And creativity is about using that experience and that knowledge with divergent thinking. But we do that experience. So there's a really strong place for that. For me, when I looked at MBA programs, they were geared more to like corporate, like I'm going to go work in a large corporation and help manage. I had no interest in doing that. So I thought, well, why would I do that? It's easy to chase. It's easy to throw. And this is something I have to be careful of myself. It's easy to throw money at something because you want a result when actually you just need to do the work. Right. And so that was where I thought, I call it my cheap MBA because it wasn't cheap because of building a business, but I learned so much more about entrepreneurship by doing it myself and failing than I would sitting in a lecture hall. But I think that there is definitely a place for that. And I took a certificate of professional management through my university here, and I learned a lot through there, like SWOT analysis or, looking at profit and loss sheets. Like there's lots of, I think it's really looking at what am I trying to do? And am I just trying to pay? Am I just trying to like check a box, or am I actually trying to do the work? I think that's where I see it. What do you think, Ken?
Well, very similar. I like to say that university or education doesn't teach you how to think, but it helps you understand what you need to think about.
Mhm.
And I think that when you talk about the P&L statements or SWOT or BEST or whatever, those are things that you do need to think about if you're in a business, if you're looking at the future. But no, it doesn't necessarily teach you how to think, how to approach. I'm oversimplifying because there's some wonderful courses that do that within education. But yeah, I do think it's a structure above all. But and I also agree that learn versus actually doing are both critical, because look, hey, I'm in the midst of doing my doctorate. I always wanted to do it. I'm doing it actually on human ingenuity. So thinking how we think.
Wow, that's
Um,
amazing.
so I obviously believe in highly structured learning, but I've been an entrepreneur for over 30 years. So I also believe in getting up in the morning and doing something. So, um,
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree.
so I,
Congratulations, that's a big
yeah.
deal. I mean, speaking of judgment, like some people might be like, why are you doing your doctorate now? So how did you get over that, as far as people, or feeling like people might wonder why you're doing that after so many years of being successful as an entrepreneur?
So I think there's a couple of things. I'm highly not motivated by what anybody thinks about me. Um, I think that as an entrepreneur, I think that audacity is one of my core values. I think it has to be a core value of an entrepreneur, because everyone is going to tell you why you're an idiot, why you're doing it wrong, how you're doing it wrong. You're not going to succeed. So if you don't believe in yourself, your own judgment, just don't don't be an entrepreneur. The second thing, in specific to that, is when I did my graduate school, when I did my master's, my in business, I actually took some of the courses at night, because some of the professors were teaching professionals, and my finance prof was running a huge private equity firm and wanted to give back. And I would say 25 at the time. And I said, you know what? I've learned so much. If I ever get to a point in my career where I think I have something to give back, and the ability to do that and to take a little time off of my day job, I really want to be able to do that. I just want to pay it forward that way. And I think most people accept that, and others, as you said, will just go, yeah, but you're giving away money. I said, no, no, I'm just building a better me.
Yeah,
So,
obviously connecting more to your purpose. And
yeah,
but I'm curious, if we have time, like, have you always been like that, not cared what people think, or is that a practice?
I think it's probably a little both. I will say, yeah, I'm not sure that I've ever cared that much about people's criticisms. I mean, I grew up in an entrepreneurial family, a generational family business, never had any part of it whatsoever, always did my own thing. But I always knew that my family business was an entrepreneurship, and that I would find something that I wanted to do and go after it. So um, that's how kind of how I've lived my life. And yeah,
I love it.
thank you so much for your time. This was a journey unto itself, this last 35, 40 minutes. So really enjoyed it. Really appreciated you joining us.
Thank you. And thanks for engaging my curiosity.